Have you ever wondered what it's like to work in law enforcement? Here on Behind the Star, we share stories about the Orange County Sheriff's Office, Central Florida's largest law enforcement agency. From forensics to dispatch to the deputies on patrol, we'll talk to the brave men and women who protect our community. This is Behind the Star, the official podcast of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Welcome to Behind the Star, the official podcast of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. My name is John Bustaker, your host here at Behind the Star. And first of all, I want to wish everybody a Happy New Year. And thanks again for listening to Behind the Star and sending us your comments and your tweets and all that good stuff. And I'm excited about today's show because we have a brand new unit that we're going to talk about. This doesn't happen every day on Behind the Star. A lot of times I go through the different units that we have here at the Sheriff's Office. And if this is the first time you've heard our show, what we do is we talk to the men and women of law enforcement and the civilians that work here at the Sheriff's Office. And if you like what you hear, follow us on Google Play and iTunes and subscribe, because we try to do a different show every week or so about all the different people that work here at the Sheriff's Office. So without further ado, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about a new unit that we have here at the Sheriff's Office. It's called the Behavioral Response Unit, and I have two folks here that are going to tell me all about it. I have Sergeant Bruce Vail, and I have Christin Edwards-Salinas, and she is from the Devereux Advanced Behavioral Health. She's a program manager. Welcome to Behind the Star.
Thank you.
All right, so Sergeant Vail, I'll start with you because you work here.
Right.
So why don't you explain what exactly is the Behavioral Response Unit and how did this come about here at the Sheriff's Office?
Well, the Behavioral Response Unit has been in progress for a while. We've looked at it at different times, and the sheriff has been looking at it for over a year now. It finally just came together a few months back. What we're doing is we're teaming up trained deputy sheriffs, they're CIT trained deputies, with mental health clinicians to respond to calls for service related to mental illness, PTSD, and some substance abuse cases, adding that professionalism to the response, a little more resources and a little more capabilities for the deputies out in the patrol.
So we're going to dive super into this, but before I get too far, Kristen, how is Devereaux involved with the BRU, the Behavioral Response Unit?
Sure. We're providing the clinical piece. So we have the master's level clinicians that are paired with the deputies that are going to be going out and responding with them.
So Sergeant Vail, go back a little bit. This isn't something that just we came up with in December and launched. I mean, this took some time to sort of get together and bring together here at the Sheriff's Office.
Yes, it did. It's actually been something the Sheriff's Office looked at on and off for many, many years. But Sheriff Mina, when he became involved over a year ago, he sent actually Kristen and Major Torres around the country to look at some different agencies and to see what they were doing. I wasn't aware of that, but that was already going on when I sent in my proposal to Sheriff Mina to start a unit like this. So I actually got back a signed response saying approved. I work with, it was at the time, Captain Torres.
Yeah, Captain Torres was my boss for a while in strategic communications. We've actually had him on this show. We talked about some things. He has a new job now where he's in charge of a bunch of stuff. But anyway, that's who, when we say Captain Torres, Major Torres is the same person.
Right. So he is a major now, but at the time it's Captain Torres, and I sat down with him and found out that he'd already been looking at the program. He'd already gone around. He already had some ideas of what he wanted to do, and most of that was what was in my proposal. And we sat down and kind of hammered it out, what we'd like to do, and then started writing and putting the program together.
And so we should say this is not something that the Orange County Sheriff's Office invented. There are different agencies across the country that work with clinicians and mental health professionals to handle calls and handle the residents of their jurisdiction. And so, Kristen, you got to travel a little bit to sort of see how these different agencies do this job, correct?
Correct. I had the opportunity to go out with Major Torres to California, and we went to Sacramento and Los Angeles, and we were able to ride along and actually experience firsthand what the deputies and the officers in those programs and their clinician partners were able to respond to, what they were able to help and assist people with. It was really, really a great experience.
So how do they handle it out there? And maybe is it the same that we do it here, or is it different how we're doing it?
We are doing something more similar to what Los Angeles is doing. Sacramento, they are actually a first responder team. So the clinicians and the officers in that unit looked really similar. They had similar dress. They had the same protective gear with as far as the vests. And that was interesting because we actually went to some really concerning situations that a civilian like myself wasn't really prepared for. So we said, we don't really like that very much. So when we went out to Los Angeles, we really liked their system more. It was a secondary responder team where they still had their patrol officers that went out, worked with folks initially to kind of assess a situation. And once it was determined to be safe enough that a clinician, a civilian could be on that scene and assist, then that's when their unit would respond in a pair of an officer and a clinician, and then they would be able to assist that person in a more safe way than a first responder situation.
Yeah. So Sergeant Vail, maybe explain that. How exactly does it work here at the Orange County Sheriff's Office? And we should say this launched in late December, mid-December. So we're still kind of new on this, and it's a pilot program at the moment. It's not like we have hundreds of deputies out there paired with clinicians. I think it's just two teams of two, correct?
2 teams, correct.
So how does this work? I mean, how does our agency do this? How are they prepared or paired with the clinicians? And what exactly is their role when they're out there in the field?
Right, exactly like you said. When it comes from paper, you expect things to go a certain way, and once we start actually doing it, then we start working out the kinks, and that's what we're doing now. We're trying to figure out the best way to respond, or the best way to respond to calls, things like that. And again, Kristen mentioned a minute ago is our clinicians or civilians.
Yeah,
we want to do our primary responsibility is to make sure that they are kept out of any problems or any type of dangerous situation as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, the clinicians, we should say, they don't have firearms with them. They're not there to arrest people. I mean, they are civilians.
Correct.
They look like civilians and they dress like civilians, and they are civilians.
Correct, exactly. So what we're doing is, and we also don't want to hold calls for service. So like you said, we have 2 teams right now working, and we don't want them to hold a call for service across town where it may take them a while to get there, especially these types of cases for mental illness and PTSD. So the deputy who works the zone is still being dispatched to the call. The BRU unit is going to respond as requested, or maybe when they listen up and hear the call and the type of call, the nature of call, they will start responding as a backup. So usually,
a call comes in. Yeah, maybe explain this. Call comes in to 911. Maybe I call 911. My sister is acting wild, or I don't know what's going on. She's in some sort of crisis. What happens then?
It'll go into our 911 system. It'll be dispatched just like a regular call for service. Our BRU teams will be listening up, or they'll be requested to assist, and they will respond out there. So the first deputy will probably get there first because they're working in the zone that it's in, and they'll be able to assess it and make sure everything is safe. So that our BRU, which is a deputy sheriff who is a regular deputy sheriff, which is with additional training with CIT, will be teamed up with the clinician. They will respond over there, and they will, the idea of it is the deputy, their first job is to make sure the clinician is able to do their job safely. So the step is to let them interact, be kind of a little bit distant, a little bit further back, and let the clinician do their job. Let them talk to the person. They will step in for any type of safety issues or any type of problems that may have occurred during that call for service to make sure that they're safe. Now and then we found that one of our BRU deputies is a veteran. So on some of our calls with veterans, it works great for him to be able to step up and say, hey, I know what you're going through. I also was in the military. I was a veteran. I've deployed. And sometimes that is a great bridge to create while they're out there in the call for service. But for the most part, again, the clinician's going to be doing their job and the deputy's going to be doing theirs, which is keeping them safe.
So Kristen, why did Devereaux in the first place, why did Devereaux want to be part of this pilot program right now?
Well, we have been the contract holder for mobile crisis services in Orange, Seminole, and Osceola counties, providing mobile response and rapid response services for children and young adults in crisis. 0 to 24 years old since 2015. So Devereaux really has a passion for this kind of preventative type intervention, and we want to be a part of the system that can serve the larger community beyond that age range. So we were really interested when this opportunity came about to partner with the sheriff's office, because we love the idea of the clinicians being paired with deputies for the purpose of, like Sergeant Vail said, that the deputies can be providing that the eyes on the scene and kind of watching the scene, while the clinician can engage with this person, keep them in engaged with eye contact and give them that one-on-one attention, while that deputy is able to secure the scene and keep everyone safe.
So Sergeant Vail, as I said earlier, I guess it's last year now, mid-December is when we officially launched the BRU, the Behavioral Response Unit. I was there a little bit shooting some video, getting ready to launch the unit. If you want to watch that video, it's on our Facebook page, our YouTube page. You can go check that out. But while I was there shooting video, it was during training. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the training involved, because we didn't just pair these clinicians and their deputies and said, have at it, go on out and help people. There was some training involved as well.
Yes, absolutely. And both the deputies and the clinicians are trained in their own fields. What we wanted to do is put them together and really expose the clinician to what some of the deputies are doing and let the deputies understand what the clinicians are doing and learn from them. And it really worked out well. We went through a number of different things, from just regular policy, talking about what we're going to be doing, what our procedures are. We had scenarios that we went through. We went to a simulator, and we went through that. We had some emergency medical training from one of our SWAT medics, just in case should we encounter anybody in the field or anyone is injured. We are given some emergency medical training for the deputies and for the clinicians. So it was a really good week of working together and becoming a team.
Because I was out there a few of the days, and I did see some of this training. And you're right, we were at the range one day because, as we know, the civilians, the clinicians, they're not there to be deputies, but in case something does happen, they need to at least be a little prepared for it. And so I know there was some training there just in case, worst case scenario. And that's good. I mean, I think that helps expose them to kind of the reality of what it's going to be like out there. Maybe Kristen can talk about this. Was there anything, because you were out there during the training as well. I know you're not really going out on the road with like the other two clinicians, correct?
Right, not too often.
But you were out there during the training. Is there anything that really sort of surprised you during the week while you got to team up with some of our deputies?
I think what surprised me most actually was how quickly they became a team and how quickly they really bonded and got to know each other. Just from day one, actually, we started with some activities around like, who are you and why are you interested in doing this type of role? And, just kind of finding where people's passions lie. So we felt like from jump, it was a really great bonding experience. And then definitely getting the feel for the fact that the deputies feel very strongly that one of their responsibilities is keeping those clinicians safe, which means a lot to me as their supervisor, obviously. So I thought that was really great.
So as I said, there's two people right now who are from Devereaux that are doing this. Were they just volunteers, or did you say you two are going to have to go out on the road? Like, how did you get those two to, and maybe tell me about the two people that are part of the BRU?
Sure. So Ken and Delaney are the clinicians that are part of the BRU. They've actually been with my mobile crisis team for years. They are, Ken is a mental health clinician, and then Delaney is a clinical social worker. So I also love the fact that we have a male and a female clinician, just in case the community has a specific need or desire to work with one or the other gender. Then I also really love the different perspectives, because while social workers and mental health counselors can do a lot of the exact same work, sometimes we do bring in a little bit different perspectives when it comes to mental health and social services. So I loved that too, that we have that good combination between the two of them. But with their time in mobile crisis, they really enhance that crisis response and crisis intervention skill set. They've seen a lot, they've dealt with a lot, and they both really shine in like clinical assessment, clinical judgment, and having the ability to look at someone who's really struggling with a mental health issue and engage them in like this could be a helpful process for you if you allow for me to help you. So they build rapport really easily. They're very empathetic and they want to help. So they're great for this role. But They were the two that were selected from a handful of my team members that really showed interest in this. And I know when we are ready to grow this program, that we have a few folks from my current team that would probably be really interested in that.
So Sergeant Vail, when the planning was going on to figure out kind of how this whole unit would work, was there an idea of like the specific types of calls that some of these deputies and clinicians would go on? And what I mean by that is it, okay, when you say mental health crisis, that's a huge, I think, umbrella. And so was there a specific, okay, we know they're going to go to this, and this, or is that kind of what we're figuring out right now? Because we've only been doing this for like 3 weeks now.
Right, and like we were talking about a little bit earlier, when you start putting it on paper and then you start doing it, things start changing a little bit, and all the what-ifs start showing up over the last couple of weeks. And a lot of the questions and the real cases, the real calls for service are coming out. When we originally put this together was anything to do with mental illness, depression, suicide, suicidal thoughts, anything that we can help a person with to direct them, because our overall goal in the program is they're not providing the treatment in the field, they're not counseling people in the field, we're trying to get them to the right resources. So that's where our clinicians are so valuable, where they can talk to the person, they can come up with a good idea of how to best get them the treatment they need. Our goals are to eliminate or reduce their exposure to law enforcement, reduce their exposure to the Orange County Jail, and of course to Baker Acts as well.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it is necessary to perform Baker Acts for the person's well-being, but we're hopefully going to start working with people to reduce the number of Baker Acts. We have a number of people in the community that have been Baker Acted multiple times and have a long history of misdemeanor arrests and Baker Acts. And those are the ones we're really focusing on now, the repeat calls for service, the people that have been in the system numerous times and it all seems to be mental illness related.
Yeah.
We're trying to get them to the right resources.
Because that's really doing nobody any good. I mean, if you just keep arresting somebody who obviously has some sort of mental illness, condition, crisis, whatever you want to call it, you're not helping them. You're really not helping society. You're just sort of putting them somewhere for probably a short period of time, like a jail or a hospital or somewhere, and then letting them go. So then a week goes by and it happens again. And so it sounds like at least the overall goal is to maybe, as you said, recognize some of these people and say, look, maybe we need to do something more than just keep arresting them because it's not helping anybody.
Sure, absolutely. And what we found very quickly is so many people in our patrol, so many people in our management level on two different levels. One is to help the community because we have so many deputies when I was getting this going that would call me up and say, hey, we have this individual over here I've been dealing with for years, this person here. We just don't know what to do or how to get them help. So deputy sheriffs aren't always able to come up with the resources and the time that they would like to, and they really want to do something more, and this gives them the opportunity to get it to the right person or the right people to make that happen.
And I don't think it's any surprise that, our deputies are not trained. They didn't go to school for 10 years to deal with mental health crisis. Yeah, they have to deal with it every day probably,
yes,
but that's not what their focus and their job is supposed to be.
Well, that's where my interest in this came from, because I've been adjunct faculty out at UCF for just going on 25 years now. About 12 or 13 years ago, I had a special topics class and we talked about all the different roles that police officers have. And putting that together, and people don't realize that everyone that has a problem at their house or in their neighborhood or anything else, they call police. So police go out to everything from the barking dog to the loud bird next door to the neighbor's sprinkler goes on my yard to every single thing that you can possibly imagine. We are the one that makes the house calls. So we go out and we have to try and deal with these situations. Many times I found that deputies responding out to calls, and you're limited on what you can do as a deputy. You have to solve a problem. It may be a convenience store calling because a person's walking around in there and yelling profanities and causing problems and scaring a lot of the customers. Well, the deputy sheriff or law enforcement officer has to do something. If they go out there and they don't fit the Baker Act, which many do not, even if, Baker Act is very specific, in danger to themselves or others, and they are not taking care of themselves. They need some type of immediate help or assistance. If it doesn't fit that, then they look at what else they have. Are they committing a crime? because they can't just leave. They're expected to solve this problem. So many times you would find that people are arrested on trespassing after warning because the person is told to leave and then they come back. Misdemeanor crimes, resisting an officer without violence, things like that were very, very common with people with mental illness because they come into contact with law enforcement over and over, and many of those contacts become negative. So there had to be a better way to do something about it. And like Kristen was talking about earlier, or you mentioned, this isn't new to the country. Many different agencies have done something like this, similar. Not many in the area, but other people are doing other types of things. And that's what I did. I looked at the research to figure out what other areas are doing. LA County is one of the largest. They've been around for a long time, 93, 94. Is that right, Kristen?
Yeah.
So they've been doing things for a long time. They have a much larger agency and larger
Budget.
population, budget, everything. Exactly. So that was more about the time I sent in the original proposal to do something similar to this as a program.
Well, it only took 25 years.
Yeah,
well,
right.
Better
Well,
late than
yeah.
never, I guess.
So it did come around, and police officers have been dealing with this forever. And I was really surprised putting this together, the number of people that I've worked with for 20 plus years that have not only called me up and said how excited they are we have a program like this, but also had personal experiences to talk about. Their mother had mental illness for many years. They went through how their sister went through mental illness, how one of them, his brother suffered with mental illness for so many years and ended up taking his own life. And so many law enforcement officers were touched by the same issues that the community deals with. They were so happy to see that we have a program and so interested. And that's the thing I've seen on the road with the deputies when the teams show up out there. A lot of the deputies are just really interested, so they hang around and they look and they want to watch and see how things are done. And they're just, really happy that we have this because they want to help the person and they don't always know what they can possibly do. So this gives it the extra time, and time is a big part also. Where the deputies have so many calls for service, some of the areas of our county, not uncommon to have 12, 15, 20 plus calls holding. They can't always spend 2 or 3 hours talking to a person where we can and our clinician can. We can spend that extra time needed. We can spend the time and get them to the right resources.
So, Kristen, I know we've only been doing this here at the Sheriff's Office for, 3-4 weeks now, maybe 2-3 weeks, really. Ken and Delaney, how have they liked it so far? I'm sure you've talked to them a little bit. And has anything sort of surprised them, you think, as they've been out on the road having to maybe work on some of these calls?
Sure. Yeah, they've expressed that they really like it. There are definitely some really fun characters that they have come across. Interesting people, in the civilian world, we just think everyone wakes up and goes to work and, their kids go to school and things like that. But that's been kind of the big wake up call is that there is...
all kinds of people out there.
There are all kinds of people, day and night, and just the different lifestyles that people have and the different needs that people have, for sure. But they've expressed just they like not knowing every single day exactly what they're going to run into, and they're just kind of open and excited about the adventure that every day kind of has in store for them. And that was something that they learned to deal with in mobile crisis. With you wake up and you have your shift that you're going to work, and you don't know if the call that comes in is going to be a suicidal person or a person suffering with delusions or hallucinations, and you just kind of have to be ready for whatever. So they do love it. Yeah.
How about on the sworn side? How have things gone so far? And has anything maybe surprised us, or have we learned anything in these first few weeks?
I think they're really excited to get out there, and we've had so many follow-up cases, which is a big part of our program also. Is even if there are cases that the person was Baker acted when we weren't working or something happened overnight or over the weekend or sometime, we get all those reports. So what the BRU teams are doing is they pull open all those reports and they're doing follow-up on it. What we found very quickly is exactly what I expected, was the overwhelming number of cases that are coming in, that they can only get to so many a day. So I see a little bit of frustration on them working 10 hours a day. They're ready to keep going. They want to work more cases. They want to do more follow-up. We can't possibly keep up with the number. And you mentioned budget earlier. And I got to say that an important part of this is we weren't given an additional budget. The Sheriff's Office did not get additional budget. This came out of Sheriff Mina's existing budget. I'm not privy to the specifics. I just know that he had to find the money to make this program happen from the 2 deputies and 2 clinicians and his existing budget. So we hope to grow in the future. We hopefully still look at some other funding sources in the future. But the fact that we have a program going right now, it's working, and we're out there making cases and working cases right now is a big step.
Mm-hmm. I know you mentioned, for a long time you had hoped for this and advocated for a behavioral response unit. What about from the community? Do you think there was a sort of call, and maybe this is something in just the last 5 years, 10 years? I'm not a deputy, but do you think there's been sort of a shift in society that says we need this as law enforcement and with clinicians because there's so many people out there struggling with mental health?
So many of our calls for service are related to mental health, especially a lot of our cases that are repeat cases, the same people over and over. So many of them are related to mental illness. So I think the need's been there for many, many years. It's just a matter of finding the program, the right people to put it together and show an interest in it. And law enforcement in general, like you mentioned earlier, law enforcement has a specific job. It's enforcing the law, maintaining order, things like that. And this is something that we fall into over and over, but it's never been a function of the law enforcement officer, which obviously, like you said, they don't go to training for 10 years of school, 8 years of school to get that degree and work on that. Otherwise, they would be doing that instead of just law enforcement. So they need this additional resource. I really expect that over the next year, you're going to see a lot more of these popping up around the country. I was happy to hear that as soon as we announced our program, or you did the initial announcements that came out, it's a number of agencies around Central Florida that have already reached out and expressed some interest in coming out, seeing our program, getting our paperwork, looking at what we're doing, and wanting to either work with us or duplicate what we're doing in their communities. So I really expect this is going to be a big part of law enforcement in the future.
So I want to ask both of you this, and either one of you can answer. So let's say you get to a call and there's somebody that needs maybe more help than they can get in that 5, 10, 20 minute, hour long session. What happens next? I mean, are they taken somewhere? What's sort of the long term? I mean, if somebody really needs a lot of help and you get there, I mean, do we take them away, or what happens?
Well, the Baker Act in the state of Florida is involuntarily admitting someone for mental health assessment and that kind of initial treatment. It's not typically a long-term intervention that is going to solve all of their concerns and issues in one fell swoop. So the other issue with the Baker Act is that, like Sergeant Vail said, there's really specific criteria. So they have to be a danger to themselves or others, and also a danger to themselves in the sense that they aren't caring for themselves properly. And then with the different criteria for law enforcement and a little bit different criteria for mental health, licensed mental health counselors and licensed social workers, it can be kind of tough. You can have someone sitting in front of you and you're saying to yourself in your head that this person really needs more help, but they aren't checking all of those boxes to meet that criteria. So it can be really challenging. But the good thing about the mobile crisis clinicians, as far as like the experience that they had in mobile crisis, they've become really well aware of some of the resources in the community, really well connected with other providers. So I feel really confident that even if they're, working with someone in a moment where they're not meeting that criteria to really be taken anywhere, I do feel like these are the folks that are going to be able to encourage and empower the people in the community that need these types of services to get that service and get that help. And they're going to be able to network, link them to services, and really with the follow-up piece, keep that relationship going and really encouraging them to go to those appointments and meet with the doctors and therapists that we want to link them with.
And that was going to be my next question. I know we talked about sort of follow-up and long-term care. I mean, how does the BRU unit do that? I mean, do you just keep a checklist or a database of, we called on Susan at 6 o'clock on a Friday. Now it's a week later. Let's give her a quick call and make sure she's all right. Or we're in the neighborhood. There's her house. Let's just see if she's doing okay. I mean, how do you do follow-up?
Well, it's pretty much like you said. We do have, as people come in and reports are generated, whether it be from us initially or from the patrol deputies, it comes across our desk, and then we start putting it on a focus to make contact with them. Now, every one of them is different. Sometimes it was somebody who may be having a bad day. They had some depression going on. Maybe they made some comments that they were very depressed and down and they wanted some help. That may be very different from somebody who has been diagnosed with mental illness and has been treated for many, many years. And now, again, as they're going off their medications, refuse to take it or refusing to accept that they have mental illness at this point. Those are the ones we're spending a lot more time with, especially recently. So it's not a random check. We actually have every single day they come in, they open up the book, see what's new, and we keep a list of all the ones that are open. We're taking notes as far as not medical notes, but notes, hey, we stopped by, we talked to this person, they're doing well, we talked to their mother, we talked to their neighbors or friends or something, and they seem to be doing well, or whoever their caretaker is, and just hoping that we can keep them on the right path to helping themselves. So
I know we only have 2 teams right now, and it's a huge county, and there's millions of people that live here. But I'll ask both of you, and maybe you can both answer this. How do we know this is working?
Yeah, right now we're measuring productivity, and it's a very good question because it's something that we're looking at doing, is to figuring out a measurement or way of measuring our success. Because we can talk about productivity, the number of cases that we work, the number of people we contact, the number of times that we go out and meet with people, all that is volume. We have been talking to the University of Central Florida. They're also very excited through the Criminal Justice Department and the social work. Some of the people over there talking about actually having a way of effectively measuring the program and showing, which I'm quite certain, maybe I'm kind of biased in this, but I'm sure we're going to be successful. But maybe they'll be able to point us in the right direction and say, this may be a better way to go than that, or this is what's working great, focus on this area. So I really hope that we're going to be able to get something going with them. And they're, like I said, they're very excited about the program also. Many of them are social workers or licensed social workers. They teach there as faculty now. And they've also talked about the need or interest in this program in the past.
How about on the Devereaux side? How do you know it's a beneficial partnership on your side?
Absolutely. And I think there's a huge value in finding the statistics and the data that with numbers that can show success. But there's also kind of a qualitative success story with these families that are saying that they're very grateful that this program exists and that their family member, their loved one, is being served and being assisted and being helped. And also just from the individuals themselves that are, thank you for giving me this opportunity instead of putting me back in the hospital, because that's sometimes a cycle folks want to break. So we know that the success stories and the lives and the families that we're going to be able to touch and impact in a positive way, I think that's going to be a big part of showing the success. So
where is this in a year or 2 years from now? Where do you think this goes?
Probably a lot larger than it is right now, and I really expect it to be. And we talked about that before, and Major Torres and Christin have all talked about that. We're so happy to have this pilot program going. We can see already that how big it needs to be, how big it will probably grow to be. I expect to probably, or hopefully have, 6 to 8 people going. We really want to expand the days of the week because we're limited with 2 teams. And the hours. I'd really like to cover a lot more hours than we are right now.
Well, Sergeant Vail, Christin, thank you so much for chatting with me on Behind the Star, and good luck with the Behavioral Response Unit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Behind the Star. You can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Also, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Until next time, I'm John Bustecker, and this is Behind the Star.